Part 1 of session 43 of the Law of One, and let's talk about cattle mutilations and conditions in fourth density. It sounds weird that I say cattle mutilation with that enthusiasm, but it's the Law of One, so you know what I mean. Let's begin. So, we're going to talk about cattle mutilation, but that's going to be just a couple of questions, and there is always some good information that we get out of that, at least I do, and that's what I want to share with you, because it's a nasty topic, and there's something that even people in the UFO research and all this, they seem to don't get it, and as usual, there is some sensationalism and some misdirection, I believe. So hopefully my contribution helps to gives a little bit more balance to this view of the negative actions on Earth or the whole cosmos, because that's the purpose of the Law of One. Just as a brief introduction, remember that when we talk about the Law of One, we're talking about balance of understanding and wisdom, love and understanding and wisdom. So we're looking at reality from a sixth density being perspective, which is Ra, and we're also stimulating our third eye chakra, which is the indigo ray, that deals with balancing love and wisdom and seeing the creation as one. There is no polarity, there is no good or bad, there is no positive and negative, there is no light and darkness. It is just like the beginning works of union, which is what makes us reach seventh density, and in our body would be God's consciousness. Okay, so just a little introduction into that, because that's probably where I'm going to head with the cattle mutilation interpretation of what Ra says, which I think is fascinating. It's a fascinating topic, but yeah, we're going to talk about that. The later part of the session, actually halfway through the session, and I think after a question that we're going to cover too, of course, and it starts dealing with conditions in fourth density, and then it goes into fifth density and sixth density. So I'm just going to cover in this first part because it's a long session. There's a lot of exchanges between Dawn and Ra, but they're very short. However, I'm going to cover just half of it until the point where I believe they start talking about the conditions of fifth density, but that's going to be for next video in any case. So I'm going like from middle to last and now to the beginning. The beginning of the session actually starts with Ra. I'm just going to read that directly from the material and not show the slides, because it's just a reference. There's 4 questions that I didn't, or 4 exchanges between Dawn and Ra that I didn't include here because there's not much relevance. Again, this is just part of the vanilla material that we have. It's not part of book 5 or specific of the re-listen version. It's just the contact with Ra, and it starts just by Ra when they communicate. As soon as they started getting communication from Ra, Ra always started by saying, "I greet you in the love and in the light of the one infinite creator. We communicate now." At least that's the majority of them. They say, we communicate now, right? So in this one, they say, "I greet you in the love and in the light of the one infinite creator." And they say, "Before we communicate, may we request the adjustment without the touching of this instrument's physical body complex of the item which presses upon the instrument's head. This is causing some interference with our contact." So they go into a couple of exchanges, and Dawn asks if it's the pillow or something else. Then Ra says there is like a little folding in the at the area of the crown of Carla's head, so the crown chakra. So that fold needed to be flattened out, and that's what they did. They just did that. And in the exchange 43.4, Dawn says, "I'm sorry that we failed to notice that," and Ra just says, "We communicate now." So that's like their all right, we're here, Sometimes when I read it, it sounds funny because it seems like, you know, Don says, "Oh, I'm sorry that I did that," and they just say like, "All right, we're here. What do you want?" But it's not like that, of course. They're just saying, "Okay, we're here to communicate now." And so that is the beginning of the session. Just a little adjustment on the setup that they have for the channeling. And yeah, we're gonna go straight into the first question. Remember, from last session, Don wanted to ask about cattle mutilation. And it's funny, these are the things that I just consider personally funny, that, you know, sometimes there's a topic or a subject that Ra is very interested in talking, and they just go over. Like, they say, okay, this is going to be the final question, and Don keeps asking and asking, and they keep answering. And in this one, Ra said, like, yeah, no, we're out. We don't want to talk about cattle mutilation. But this time, I mean, they didn't say that, but you just, I don't know, I just like to put a little humor into this. But they finished with that, and they said, no, let's leave it for next session, you know. I like to think that Ra was like, no, let's not talk about cattle mutilation. But now, you know, they have to talk about cattle mutilation because that's the first question that Don has. And hey, Ra was there to answer questions, and you're just going to see what Ra says at the end of this. So, all right, let's talk about the phenomenon of cattle mutilation, which we touched about, I think 10 sessions ago or so, even more. It's been a while. Don says, question number 5, or exchange number 5. I'll just try to pick up from the last question left over from the last session, if you can answer it. I don't know if it is of any importance. See, Don is very perceptive there. He knows already, like, how far off this question is. But it just occurred to me that the parts removed in cattle mutilations are the same every time. And I just wonder if this was related to the energy centers and why they were important, if that was so. It's a really good question, actually, or a really good parallel that Don is asking here, or creating. So Ross says, this is basically correct if you may understand that there is a link between energy centers and various thought forms. Thus, the fears of the mass consciousness create climate for the concentration upon the removal of bodily parts which symbolize areas of concern or fear in the mass consciousness. So again, you know, even though cattle mutilation is not something conducive, let's say, to spiritual growth and evolution of the soul, if you will, it's a good observation from Don, saying, like, you know, it's always the same parts. Are they related to the energy centers? And Ron says, yeah, you know, there is a relationship, and the link is between the energy centers and various thought forms. But the thought forms are, say, interested in certain parts that are related to the emotions and fears of society. You know, why else would that be? You know, so the fears of mass consciousness create the climate for the concentration upon the removal of bodily parts, which is our collective consciousness has fears of any kind. You know, it could be survival, or sexual, or from, you know, any sort of, you know, manipulation. So these energy centers are related to certain organs, and the reason why they do it, I think they're going to explain it, so I'm not going to go too further into this. But yeah, that's what they're saying. You know, there is a link between the thought forms that are the ones creating the cattle mutilation. Just if you don't remember from that session, I forgot which one it was, where we talk about cattle mutilation, but there are two type of entities that do this. One is a thought form, and the other one is a creature, which, you know, creepy enough, we're gonna get into that, and I have something very important to say about that, and some small short rant that I'll go into, possibly not that long, but, you know, it has to do with this, the agenda of the Orion group, as we'll find out. So again, I forgot what I was saying, but had to do with the our predisposition as a collective consciousness to incite these entities, the thought forms in this case, to create this mutilation of cattle. which it's a pretty nasty business because they remove. I'm not very familiar, but the little I've heard is like certain organs, reproductive organs, I believe, rectum, the eyeballs. I forgot what else, like testicles maybe, which is sexual organs. I mean, it's just weird, what they do. But now we can see why, because this creates a sort of, well, I'm getting ahead of myself here, but it's creating, let's just say so far that it's related to the fears of, and not only fears, but our conditioning in terms of how we, what we deem relevant, what we deem important. It's all physicality, of course. That's the low blows are always there. Low energy centers. So it's about bodies. Like we are concerned with our bodies. We're concerned with it's orange and yellow energy centers. So again, it has to do with the climate of the mass consciousness, because that's what the removal of the bodily parts symbolize in terms of the organs and that, and people relate it right away. It's like a subconscious relationship that they create. So that symbolizes the areas of concern or fear. Concern, see, that's the word. We are concerned with our body. And I don't know, let's say for some reason we're concerned with nipples, for some bizarre, wouldn't be surprised, with our social media being as bizarre as it is, going into nipples. Nipple fetish probably exists, but just saying that, and there's a lot of, concern with nipples, and, cattle mutilation might very well go into nipples, So, I don't know, just making up stuff here, but just for you to kind of get the idea. And then people freak out. It's like, oh my God, nipples, nipples are being removed from cattle. Oh, my nipples. I find it funny. I don't know. I'm sorry. Some people find this grim, cattle mutilation and so on. And I'm not leaving my compassion for animals, obviously, on the side. I'm making fun of society, not of animals. I think that's what they do to animals is gross, of course. But once again, we have to balance our love and compassion for animals with some wisdom. So that's what we're here for. Let's get some wisdom from Ra. As Don says in question 6, are you saying then that these parts that are removed are related to the mass consciousness of the third density human form on the planet, and this fear is being used in some way by the second density entities, or, correction, the thought form entities that do the mutilations? And Ra says this is correct as laterally stated. The thought form entities feed upon fear, thus they are able to do precise damage according to systems of symbology. The other second density types of which you speak need what you call blood. Now we're getting into the creepy zone, because so far we were talking about thought forms, yeah, it's funny how Ra mentions that, because Don corrected himself, but Don, Ra mentions it there, and it goes into the conversation, veers into something else that is going to lead into my rant, or my little rant. So Don is asking, what we said already, is this related to the fears of the mass consciousness? And Ra says this is correct, as we already said. The thought forms, they feed upon the fear. So, thought forms are entities on their own that exist. They reside in the astral planes. They don't reside physically. They're not incarnate here. So the way for them to feed from whatever their source is, and these are thought forms that we have created as humanity, from any sort of need that we have that is low vibration. There's a lot of sexual there, because there's a lot of sexual distortions and not what sex is really meant for. And these, I'm not saying that they shouldn't exist. It's just that's they're there as teachers. Thought forms are there as teachers too. They are here to teach you, whatever it may be. Fear of being eaten, fear of being stabbed in the back, fear of this, fear of that, fear. They're fear-based, so they're here to teach you something. But they need that fear to maintain themselves. They need that fear, you know. So in a way, you can just see the ecosystem that exists within the different energy centers and their purpose. You know, there are entities that definitely need this sort of nourishment, and you know, we've all played our parts to feed them. You know, we all pray because it's a symbiosis. As we learn from them, we learn that we don't need them anymore, that they are not part of us. However, you know, the more and the longer we stay in the lower energy centers, concern, our attention, our focus, our energy is just going into the energy centers, the lower energy centers, then we're feeding that. And that's fine. You know, the thing is that we who are of a north-oriented goal, because we already discovered that there is a north, and the north being the North Pole, say, that is consciousness, is God's consciousness. Your God's consciousness, not some separate consciousness. It's yours, it's you, it's actually who you are. So that seeking makes us feel, sometimes the ego feels that you have to get rid of fears, you have to get rid of, you know, and that is blocking, that is repression of emotions. You shouldn't feel like that, you know, you should explore it. And you know, so the thought forms are there to teach us something, and they need their nourishment. Now this is one of the ways that they create sort of like a feast for them, because it is allowed. It's allowed by the consciousness, and it's allowed by those who serve that consciousness too, and who actually benefit from that consciousness, which is of course the Orion group, maintaining people there because it's easier to manipulate. It's not because it's, you know, it's better for them. It's, yes, it does feed some of their pets, let's call them that, but it's just put it this way, there are angels in the different planes too. So I'm kind of being thorough here, or for completion. We have angels who reside in the astral planes as well, but they are guides for us. They're teachers too, the same way. And, you know, there are others in the Confederation, of course, there are all of the Confederation who benefit. I'm not going to call them pets, but you can call them pets too. I mean, they are, you know, here to serve. Angels are here to serve, or what we perceive as angels. They're called different names, you know, ancestors, guides, and so on. Well, ancestors could be more, you know, to our actual ancestor. But in any case, it's just energy. Energy of higher frequency. That's it, you know, period. Without getting into specific symbological meanings of this and that. It's just higher energy frequencies, higher frequency energies. So that is what feeds. I'm sorry, this is not my rant. I'm just going on a tangent here. But you know, this is important to know that it exists and it's everywhere. You know, so when you are in a place where there is, say, you know, a lot of drug abuse or addiction, or an environment, there's, you know, a lot of, you know, anger and fear, and there is, you know, this threatening, you know, environment, which is, say, in my countries we call it barrios, which is the slums, say, in where, you know, people live, and there's a sort of hierarchy of thugs that live there, and they have their own, you know, call them mafias too, or gangs. So, you know, these places are filled with this low energy vibrations, because there's a lot of fear there. And there, believe me, there's a lot of entities there. They feed on this, they feast on this. You know, it could be other places. It could be places like, I don't know, it could be anything that is related to the lower energy center, survival, identity, sexuality, then I don't know, anything that you can see that is very intense in those lower frequencies. You can definitely, you bet yourself that there is a vast amount of entities that live there. We call them negative entities, but that's just, you know, their purpose. They're there as a school for these people, and people come out of these areas, and this is why people call them heroes, and rightly so. I mean, they came out of hell and they defeated all those entities. They just transcended all that, and now they found God, they found Jesus, they found Buddhism, they found anything spiritual, because they found higher energy frequencies. So that is, that's the reason. So it's all an interplay. We're looking at the ecosystem of energies that are here, and it's not that we should get rid of them. They're supposed to be here for the teach learners. So let's go on. Next question is the last one, cattle mutilation, I think, where Don says, these other second density types need the blood to remain in the physical. Do they come in and out of our physical density from one of the astral planes? And Ra says, these entities are, shall we say, creatures of the Orion group. They do not exist in astral planes, as do the thought forms, but wait within the Earth's surface. We as always remind you that it is our impression that this type of information is unimportant. Yes, it is. I'll go back to that, because that's what's going to end the cattle mutilation discussion. But now, and this is going to lead me to my short rant, if I didn't enough already, Ra says that these entities actually exist. These are not entities that come out of the astral plane. They manifest here, they do their thing, and then they leave because they need that as nourishment. Ra is actually saying, which is the creepy part, for the people that are, and again, this is not to invoke any sort of fear or terror, but these creatures are real. These creatures are. I remember in my teenagers, there was a thing in Puerto Rico called the chupacabras. And el chupacabras is it was this creature that would go and do cattle mutilation. It would feed these animals, and people were freaking out. So these creatures are real. There are physical beings that exist in our reality. They are creatures of the Orion group. I call them pets because that's they created them. They do not exist in astral planes as do the thought forms. The thought forms are created by our mass consciousness, and they exist in the ecosystem as they are. But these other creatures are from the Orion group. And I love how they say this is, I don't know, it just sounds creepy when they say, but wait within the Earth's surface. Corey Good, if you are familiar with Corey Good and David Wilcock, Corey Good has some stories about, I forgot if he went down there or if people, no, he read from the, I forgot what they were called, but they were like clear tablets that he used to study from, according to his story. And he would read that there were creatures under the Earth's surface that were kind of like humanoid, reptilian looking. And, these things apparently are real. There are several explorers who have described these creatures and, their interaction with them, which not physical verbal interaction, but just like looking at them, and they're horrifying because that's their purpose. So these creatures do exist, and that's their purpose. They're just here to instill fear in people by doing certain things and just by existing, but it is our complete will or our focus to give them that energy or not. Just me by talking about them, there is some sort of attention to them. This is why negative entities, this is higher density entities, they love giving names, when they channel. And this is why Confederation, other sources, they don't give names. They just give some Ra, well, they called us Ra. Yeah, we're Ra, whatever. You call us whatever. And they several times the Confederation says, like, you guys are completely, you have a fetish for names. You have to name everything. Why? When you give name to something, you give power to it. And you're taking away power from you. So, this is why Buddhism as well is just like, no names. We have no names. We don't know. We have no idea what's going on. This is just reality. It's just, woo, this is it. It's all vibration. Anything else, we don't know. But yeah, negative entities from higher densities, they like to give names, and they love that because they create that that focus of us calling, whatever it is. So even in some visions that I've heard, where they see like a congregation of Buddha and Jesus and so on, and the person says like, oh, Jesus, he's like, forget, don't call me Jesus, I'm not Jesus, I'm like, I'm just here to inspire you. So so just putting focus on negative entities is just enough to feed them, because you're giving attention to them, you're giving your energy. You are so powerful. We don't have any idea of how powerful we are by channeling our energy in what we focus. This is why the will is so important in our work, because whatever we put our will is where we put our energy, and our energy just manifests in our reality, and just whoop, it's like a projection. So that's another exercise. It's very important that we mentioned in the last video. Where you put your attention is where you put your energy, Joe Dispenza says, and it's true. But situated in your energy centers, analyze yourself, where you're putting your attention every day. And you say like, okay, I'm putting my attention there, that's fine, let me explore it, see what's happening in my lower energy centers. But you have a calling, you have a eternal calling from God, and God comes from up here, the upper energy centers. So again, this is not even my rant. Oh my God, I'm sorry, going on tangents, but yeah, these creatures exist. This is going to my rant. Okay, my rant is that, you see, there exists the possibility for Orion Group to create these creatures, or to maintain them, whatever they did. I don't know. I don't know the history behind it. But if that exists, and talking about the focusing of energy that we may have, like, oh my God, these creatures actually exist, and they are, and there are people who invest years of their lives, talking about this and getting really into it and going into, we should classify them, we talk about this, and you are feeding them by doing this. See, now I'm not saying that they shouldn't, because that would be breaking the ecosystem. But people who are interested in the higher energy centers and experiencing reality from a different point of view, maybe it's not that important. And that's why Ross says this information may not be important. It's kind of unimportant, they say. But my little twist to this is to say that by knowing that this is true and informing ourselves that this is true, we also become aware that the opposite is also true. So as we accept and we realize that this sort of creatures and entities are real, we realize that their opposites are also real. So, we say like, oh, instead of giving my attention to these thought forms, let me give my attention to angels, or whatever name you want to call them, higher frequency entities, who are here to show me, harmony, to show me life, beautiful as it is, and not to keep me in the fear-based mentality, which is what they want to do. Getting alcohol addicted, or drug addicted, or being sexual addicted to anything. It's just, an addiction is that. It's just creating that, you're investing your energy and they're leeching your energy that way, because the thought forms are there, and they're like, oh God, thank goodness this person is thinking about this, which I need so much. So instead of that, we become aware of its opposite, because, and now I go into the creatures. If these creatures are real, then other creatures are real too, who are opposite to them, because there is balance in everything. And if the Orion Group uses these creatures for that, then there are other creatures, that exist for us. And maybe you can see this as your animal totem, that when you see them in nature, you say, wow, this is a message for me. It comes from a higher frequency. I don't know, just go bonkers on this and create your own reality on the hidden creatures that might exist. Maybe, I don't know, what do they call them? Unicorns, or whatever it is, fantastic creatures that may exist in reality. But in any case, it's just transmuting this energy from lower frequencies to higher frequencies, because they exist, and that's fine. That's all we need to know. You need to learn darkness in order to appreciate light. So this is my way of saying that there is something of value to take out of here for your day-to-day, I don't know, experience, focus of energy, attention, and like Ra says, you know, it is our impression that this information is unimportant, and Don agrees and says, I agree with you wholeheartedly, but I sometimes am at a loss before investigation into an area to know whether it is going to lead to a better understanding. This just seemed to be related somehow to the energy centers that we were speaking of. Now he goes into the next question. I'm going to make a statement and have you comment on it for its correctness. The statement is, when the creator's light is split or divided into colors and energy centers for experience, then in order to reunite with the creator, the energy centers must be balanced exactly the same as the split light was as it originated from the creator. Is this correct? Ra says, to give this query a simple answer would be nearly impossible. We shall simplify by concentrating upon what we consider to be the central idea towards which you're striving. We have many times now, well, I added an extra many there, but we have many times now spoken about the relative importance of balancing as opposed to the relative unimportance of maximal activation of each energy center. The reason is as you have correctly surmised. Okay, so what is Don asking? And what is Ra talking about? Don asks, a very good question actually, very intellectual question about metaphysics. If the light was split in energy centers in a way for us to figure out, say, to realize, then for us to reunite, so there is the prism, from pure light, prism, 7 energy centers, and we are trying to figure out those energy centers. I have 4 here, but it's supposed to be 7. This, right. You get the meaning. 7 energy centers, and they're supposed to be balanced in that way, or they're supposed to be realized. You know, this is our struggle. This is our. Let me change that word. It's not struggle. This is our play. This is our game. You know, we're here to. It's like a puzzle is a jigsaw puzzle or a puzzle in general is a game. However, it's a struggle. So that's you know, that's how it is. We just play, you know, how do I figure this out? And it's fun, you know. And you see, it's funny, a jigsaw puzzle is actually a pretty good analogy here, because you're breaking down an image. The image of God is broken down into pieces, shattered into thousands of pieces, millions, infinite pieces, who knows. So, but to maintain it into the human realm, thousands of pieces, you know, and it's our lifetime to keep playing. That is the realization of, wow, I did it. You know, I finally figured it out. So that's basically what Don is saying, you know. He mentions, what does he say? Splits. Split light was, it is our, you know, our goal to reunite with the creator by reuniting, you know, the split light. But Ra is saying, you know, that this is, it's an impossible answer, and I can get it because there is no, I don't know, I feel like there is no specific way to do this, and this is going to get into what Ra says about how we need to find balance, and balance is where we're going to find everything, because it's not about, you know, it's split, and now we need to figure it out exactly as it is. So, at least from my limited point of view, I see it that way. I'm not entirely sure why is it. They say it's a simple answer. Oh yeah, to give a simple answer, this is impossible. So in any case, what they're saying in that, what they're going into is saying, let us just simplify what we think you're asking, and they go into the relative importance of balancing, because again, you know, it's the 7 energy centers that we need to work on to balance, and it's not, you know, to find the specific activation that is needed for one or the other, because, you know, we are creators here. It's not like the logos created, yes, it created a pattern, you know, in which we are going to develop, but that is not a pattern that we need to follow. Let me rephrase this, because it sounds like I'm contradicting myself. The logos creates ways into these patterns to be developed. We are the ones that are weaving the path, put it that way. And that's why I guess it's also kind of impossible to give a simple answer. But we are weaving that path, and that is the energy centers. Now, the key thing is not to activate them, randomly and, excessively, but just balancing them. And that's what they're saying. It's not a maximal activation of each energy center, but of balancing. And they're going to emphasize a little bit more here what they mean. And they say, thusly, the entity is concerned if it be upon the path of positive harvestability. Again, it's just one of the patterns, positive, one of the main paths of patterns, positive, with the regularizing of the various energies of experience. Thus, the most fragile entity may be more balanced than one with extreme energy and activity in service to others, due to the fastidiousness with which the will is focused upon the use of experience in knowing the self. The densities beyond your own give the mind... Oh my God, I can't read today. The densities beyond your own give the minimally balanced individual much time, space, and space-time with which to continue to refine these inner balances. My connection with Ra's vocabulary is not really good today. So, all right. So what's Ra mentioning and emphasizing here? So in the positive path, they are concerned with regularizing the various energies of experience. Various energies of experience are anything that is thrown to us in our reality is it's our energy, right? And that energy is an experience. So we are balancing or regularizing those energies that are coming to us, and that's how we are assimilating them. Remember when we said that no situation has an emotional charge. That means that situations are just energy, and we create emotions. We kind of tangled up the energy into different we weave that into emotions, and those emotions end up being our catalyst. So, or at least the alarm for the catalyst that is coming. So we're supposed to regularize that in the positive path. So that is through balance. That is through knowing that and accepting everything. Not saying like we need more of this, I need to do more of that, but just accepting yourself perfect as you are. You are always perfect as it is. That's how you seek balance. You always see yourself perfect. So they say that the most fragile entity may be more balanced than one with extreme energy and activity in service to others due to the fastidiousness. So a fragile entity could be somebody who is just sensitive, or not sensitive, probably not the right word, but could be sensitive to emotions, yes. But it's very balanced because I'm trying to come up with an example, but say somebody who is sensitive is not the word, but let's use sensitive for a moment. Weak sounds too much. Fragile, in the sense, fragile maybe. Is that what they use fragile? So somebody who is not very well developed in all their chakras, right? That's the perfect example. The activation of their energy centers is not too bright. They don't have a super open heart. They still have some sort of reserves into what the world should be. Who deserves love and who doesn't. They're not very wise, say, to manage this love, of course, and they have some fears and so on. But this person is, say, somebody who goes into their 9 to 5 and concerned with just, and I've met people like this who you can see that they kind of inspire this peace around them. They don't care about politics. I remember a guy from work that used to be very, you could just see the peace in him, but he wasn't a spiritual person. He was just a person that enjoyed his life and enjoyed, going to work, doing his thing, going home, popping up a beer, watching baseball, going to bed, kissing his wife and his kids. There was balance in his life. You can see that in a lot of people. And you can see, you know, completely neurotic, you know, spiritual people. I mean, well, you can see a lot of neurotic spiritual people lately, so-called spiritual. But, you know, and that's people who are probably very imbalanced because they're there to give so much love or to bring so much wisdom into people. You know, I need to inform you. I need to wake you up because you're asleep. You're a sheeple. You know, I mean, sheeple exists. That's just part of the dynamics, the ecosystem. So when we incur into imbalances and when we have this sort of ideals for life, no, ideas destroy life. So that sounds weird, but in my philosophical view, that is true. That is very, you know, Taoist, but it's true. Our ideals. How many people have destroyed our environments because of ideals? This is how it should be. Who says so? You? Who are you? So yeah, that's what they mean. You know, because there is fastidiousness with which the will is focused upon the use of experience and knowing the self. And you see this guy, which we're gonna call Bob. You know, Bob that used to go to work. He would have an experience of, you know, everything was fine. You know, he would go to work. He would have, you know, you drive home, traffic. Oh, you know, big deal, whatever. Get me upset. I do get upset with traffic, you know, but it is what it is. And you can see people like this. There was another guy actually who was very balanced too, and he was funny enough, he was a retired cop from NYPD, New York City, in the 80s. Of all years or decades, he was from the 80s, and he was so balanced. He was a phenomenal person. I still love him. I love you, Jim, if you're watching this, which you're not. Definitely not. But yeah, there's so much, you know, into how much people can be balanced. People who live in the mountains, say, you know, people who live in an island, they're very balanced. I mean, what is their life? They wake up, you know, they go fish, they go do their thing, they pick up some coconuts, they rest with their wives and talk about whatever, you know, the tides or the air or the sun. They go to bed. I mean, these are balanced people. You know, they're not fully activated, you know, whole heart, but they'll probably treat you as, you know, with much better than people in the city, right? So you can see the interplay of how balance is always key, no matter who you are, where you are, what you are. So yeah, you can see that there. I hope that I kind of illustrated that point. I think that I made some poor attempts there, but in any case, balance is key. No matter what you are or who you are, accept yourself. That's it. It's so simple, but we want to complicate it. Just that simple. This is who I am. Whatever it is, you know. Yes, this is it. That's it. What you see is what you get. You know, this is something you tell yourself. What you see is what you get. Say that as a mantra every time you wake up in the morning. When you see the mirror, you're like, hey, this is it. It doesn't get better than this. Or worse, you know, for that matter. So, alright, they say the densities beyond your own give the minimally balanced individual much time, space, and space-time with which to continue to refine these inner balances. Because once you are balanced and you have, you know, sufficiently open hearts, then you go into 4 density and you say like, oh wow, you know, I did not appreciate all of this. And now you open your heart a lot more. You know, that's the purpose of 4 density. Our further densities are there to refine the people who are minimally balanced and who have, you know, their heart open and say, wow, yeah, you know, I'm definitely on the bandwagon of loving the universe, you know, loving myself as the universe. I'm there. And then all of a sudden a portal opens when you die and you say like, wow, you know, I've entered the light. And that light is just, you know, enjoying the universe. But then you open your heart too much, and you're like raw in 4th density, and then you go to 5th density and you're like, oh my god, I have so much imbalance in my love. I need to find the wisdom to balance this because, you know, I can't keep going this way. And then you go into 6th density and so on. But that's the gist of it. Alright, we have more to cover. Don says, in the next density, or in the 4th density, is the catalyst of physical pain used as a mechanism for experiential balancing. Ross says, the use of physical pain is minimal, having only to do with the end of the 4th density incarnation. This physical pain would not be considered severe enough to treat, shall we say, in 3rd density. The catalyst of mental and spiritual pain are used in fourth density. So we're gonna get more into this, but now we're going towards fourth density because I guess Ra mentioned fourth density, or the densities above our own, and Don wanted to go there. So what was it Don asked? Pain, catalyst of physical pain use, and Ra says no. I mean, it's very minimal, having only to do with the end of fourth density incarnation, which we know there is incarnation. I made a video in Spanish, unfortunately not in English, where I described the different time space and space times that exist in the whole creation. But you're so far into this that you can visualize it yourself. You can see all the densities having time space and space time, at least from third density onwards, which is really what matters here. And you can see an interaction between our time space body or manifestation, and then space-time as the incarnation part. And so we have third density, time space, and space-time. That just means metaphysical energy existence in one side and the physical one. And then there is corresponding ones in fourth, fifth, and sixth. And you know, this is helpful to see that there are incarnations in fourth density and fifth and even sixth density. But the line between incarnations and between incarnations thins out as we progress, especially after fourth or after third density. In fourth, that line is like much thinner, so you're more in touch with your time-space body than you are here. So that's why catalyst is so strong here too in the human form or third density. But in any case, physical pain is minimal, having only to do with the end of fourth density. We're going to get into that why. They say this physical pain would not be considered severe enough to treat like it is in third density. There is no pain. There is no pain like, you know, illness. Illness is disease, and disease is an imbalance in our lower energy centers. They are related, of course, to heart chakra, but those are also related to our lower energy centers. The crystallized being in the energy centers also have some sort of disease because there's always some sort of imbalance. You know, third density is supposed to be that. You know, it's supposed to teach you that. And in fourth density, you are no longer attached to the lower energy centers. They are there as a resource rather than a resource or a frame of reference in a way. That's how I perceive it anyways. It's just speculation of mine. Disclaimer. But there is a lot more. There is no veil. When there is no veil, then you have much more perception of what your energy centers are. And you know, there's no such thing as physical pain as they explain. The catalysts of mental and spiritual pain are used in fourth density. We use that here too, but it's much rare to perceive. You know, mental, yes. Spiritual is the one that is kind of rare, but it's not rare, but it's hard to realize. It does manifest though, and that is like the yearning that we may have for unity with the Creator. And that is what fourth density is. You know, it's about experiencing more mental and spiritual pain. So let's go more into physical pain. As Don says, why is physical pain a part of the end of fourth density? Ra says you would call this variety of pain weariness. And weariness is, again, you know, it just makes sense. As you're ending your incarnation, you can see that here too. You have a sort of like old people, they just want to go. You know, they're not unhappy with their lives. They're happy, you know, with everything they have done, but they just feel like their incarnation is over. And I can see that in fourth density, that's also the purpose. Like you see that your configuration as a body in fourth density has reached its peak. And that's it. What else are you going to do? So you start feeling this weirdness, and it's just time to go. So it's not pain as Ra said, you know, not like in third density that needs to be treated. It's just, you know, it's a pain that you feel the pain, the physical pain of your body dissolving, I guess, into just, you know, time space. Again, you go into and you reincarnate again. We're gonna explore, I think, a little bit more. Yes, those are the next questions. Like how long are the lifespans there. So yeah, there's not much to say there, but there is some physical pain at the end of the incarnation in 4 density. But it's weariness, it's not physical pain as we know it. Question 11, Don says, can you even state the average lifespan in the 4 density of space-time incarnation? And Ra says, the space-time incarnation typical of harmonious 4 density is approximately 90,000 of your years as you measure time. And space-time incarnation, again, it's just the incarnation of 4 density body. And harmonious, I like that they say harmonious 4 density, because does it leave for us to speculate that there may be inharmonious sort of 4 density? Could happen, possibly. Like Ra had a very harmonious 4 density, very harmonious. And so they were probably enjoy their 90,000 lifespan. Now remember, we had a 900 year lifespan here on Earth when we started, and there are some biblical characters that are told to be to have lived that long. Seth, I believe, was another one. I may be wrong there, even though it's not biblical. I think very bad with the Bible. But in any case, you know, 90,000 years. And I have to give credit to Scott Mandelker. I always have in the description of my videos Scott Mandelker's interpretation of the Law of One. By the way, it's a little ad for Scott. I think his interpretation is phenomenal. And I gotta give credit to what he says, or the parallel that he made between the 90,000 year and the 900 year lifespan that we have here, which is, what is it, 10, 20, 100 times more, right? 2 zeros. 100 times more the lifespan that is, say, it's the typical or the by default in 4 density. So we have 990,000 there too. Now this also relates, and Scott says, which makes a lot of sense, that there's 100 times more catalyst here in 3rd density. And that makes sense with our incarnation being 900 years. So it's 100 times more powerful. So the parallel that I'm making here, and that Scott didn't mention, or at least I didn't hear him mention, is that we have been cut down about 10 times that. So our catalyst may be 1,000 times or more. Because, I mean, we don't even have the lifespan being 90 years, but we're sort of there. You know, we can reach 90 years. And that's still, you know, a decent amount of years to be lived. And, you know, people respect you for living. Wow, you know, you live enough. But it's the quality of living to the 90 years too. That's another one. In any case, you know, 90 years, if we take this, we factor in this into our equation, does that mean we have 1,000 more times the catalyst in 3rd density right now because of our lifespan being shortened? And we talked about this in session 19 or 20, somewhere around there, why our lifespan was shortened. So does that mean that? Well, probably, you know, because our society is very sick as we know it. Our society is very physically sick. There's a lot of illness, disease. So that's pretty interesting. What does that mean? Oh, we're in hell. No, we are in heaven because we have 1,000 more catalysts to make sure we use for our spiritual growth. Now, how do you do that? Do you go outside, you know, and I'm gonna go find catalysts for me to grow? Not really. All you have to do is just be open to the universe and say, really? Catalyst? Shoot at me. Shoot at me, bro. What do you got? You know, shoot at me. What's going on? And it's going to come to you. When you analyze your life and you say, well, you know, I'm very spiritual and I love this Law of One stuff and whatever other texts that I follow, or spirituality, Buddhism, Taoism, you know, Christianity, whatever, you know, okay, you follow all that, but I still have problems. All right, those problems are your catalyst. Go work on them. You know, figure it out. You will be, sounds terrible. Not terrible. It sounds contradictory because of the way I think, but you'll be winning life, you know. You'll be beating the game. There's no game to be beaten, but you get the idea. You know, you'll be transcending. You'll be getting, you know, some what should we call it? Shouldn't be brownie points. It should be golden points, whatever. I don't know, spiritual points. Let's put it that way. Anyhow, I'm going I'm going too much sidetracking here. Next question 12. Don says, then is there a time space? Are there multiple incarnations in fourth density with time space experiences between incarnations? We discussed this already, so yeah, Ron says this is correct. How long is the cycle of experience in fourth density in our years? Ron says the cycle of experience is approximately 30 million of your years. If the entities are not capable of being harvested sooner, there is in this density a harvest which is completely the function of the readiness of the social memory complex. It is not structure as is your own, for it deals with a more transparent distortion of the one infinite creator. So yeah, that's pretty interesting. The cycle of experience is approximately 30 millions of our years. And they could be harvested sooner. Now we know that too here in third density. That's also possible. Not on planet Earth. we had 0 on the first major cycle, and then 100, only 100 and something, 150 I think, on the second major cycle. Now at the end of the master cycle, we're all running around finding harvestability, or people on Earth, but the majority seems to they're going to repeat. Anyhow, I made a video talking about harvest and how I think the transition is going, and if I remember, minute 55, I'll put it up here so you can go watch it. Just my ideas into how fourth density is going to happen. And I think a lot of people who are in third density right now, who didn't acquire enough spiritual points for harvest in this cycle at least, they are being held right now, not by anybody, but just they themselves are waiting for a planet in which they're going to incarnate, because right now all the people are incarnating are for fourth density harvest, or those who have the possibility, not those who need a lot of work. So in any case, you know, I can go on talking about this for hours. Jesus, Mary and Joseph. Alright, there is in this density a harvest which is completely the function of the readiness of the social memory complex. See, there's a difference here, and we're gonna get into that. They're saying it's not structure as is our own, so I'm not gonna spoil this for the next question, which deals more with transparent distortion of the one infinite creator. So a couple of things. One that we need to keep in mind for the next couple of questions is social memory complex, right? Is the readiness of the social memory complex. 2 is the more transparent view that we have of the one infinite creator. So those are factors that are importance of fourth density harvestability. Those 2 things, social memory complex and how we see the creator, is a different view. We can see the creator from third density in one way, in fourth density is another one, 5th, 6th, all the way to 7. So that is a function. It's very important. Don says, question 14, then the big difference in harvestability between third and fourth density is that at the end of the third density, the individual is harvested as a function of individual violet ray. But in fourth density, is it the equivalent of violet ray then for the entire social memory complex that must be of a harvestable nature to go to fifth density? And Ra says, this is correct, although in fifth density entities may choose to learn as a social memory complex or as mind-body-spirit complexes, and may graduate to sixth density under these conditions. For the wisdom density is an extremely free density, whereas the lessons of compassion leading to wisdom necessarily have to do with other selves. Alright, so let me finish the last question before I finish this up. The last question that we have, Don says, then is sixth density harvest strictly of social memory complex because, again, we have compassion blended back using wisdom? Ron says this is quite correct. And I'm just going to tackle those last 2 questions where Don, very perceptive, saying is that the big difference in harvestability between third and fourth density is that at the end of third density, the individual is harvested as a function of individual violet ray, meaning that in third density here, Your harvestability has to do with your individual beingness, your violet ray, how you know, that's why it doesn't matter, you know, how the world is. It's how you are. And that's not to say like, oh yeah, fuck the world, you know, I'm not doing anything. I'm just doing myself. You know, it has nothing to do with that. It has to do with you becoming, you know, who you are. And by default, what's funny is that now you start helping people and people are like, oh, thank you so much. And you're like, I don't know what I did, but yeah, you're welcome, I guess. You know, and just you becoming yourself, becoming a harmonious instrument to be played by the creator. But it is individual, and this is the best way you can help too, helping yourself. The more you help yourself, then the better you can help other people. So that is the big difference, because in fourth density, it is a function of the social memory complex violet ray, is what Don is saying, that the entire social memory complex must have in order to be harvestable. And Ra says that this is correct. If I was Ra, I would say like, wow, you know, you are, like sometimes Ra says to Don, like, this is very perceptive. Although in the fifth density, and they're going into fifth density, which is of great use for us too, and I'll go into the conclusions for that. It's correct, although in fifth density, entities may choose to learn as a social memory complex. So essentially, you can choose in fifth density to learn as a social memory complex because you already know unity, or you can choose again to do it individually. Now, why? Why would you go individual if you have the possibility of doing it all together? They say that the density of wisdom is an extremely free density. See? Whereas the lessons of compassion leading to wisdom necessarily have to do with other selves. So you see, you go together. And that's why I wanted to overlap the last question that I have for today's video. First part, session 43. Where Don says, you know, is sixth density harvest strictly of social memory complex? Because again, we have compassion blended blended with wisdom. And that is correct, because here we go into the nature of each energy center and each density. They are what I call inner work, outer work. Okay. First density is outer work. You're manifesting. Okay. Or the creation is being manifested. So it's outer. It's manifesting. It's coming out. Second density is inner work. Is realizing I am something. I am a self. I am this. That is graduation from second to third density. Third density is outer work. You know, it's realizing, okay, I belong to people. People are me. You know, it's an outer work. It's not inner. You have to see reflection of yourself. It's service to others, or service to self by using others. You see, it's a key difference there between service to self being like, I just like to be by myself. That's not service to self. That's fine. I like to have solitude. That's fine. You know, service to self is using other people. See, you're making use of the outer world for your own progress. And service to others, of course, positive path, you use the others as yourself. You treat others as yourself, so you're using everybody else as, hey, let's go all together. Let's all jump together. You know, yay, a party. As opposed to just me. And I'm the one in the VIP section in the party. Which sucks, by the way. Never go to a VIP section. Always sucks. Go down there with people. Especially in EDMs and stuff like that. When I used to go to EDMs, I went once to VIP and I was just like, this sucks. So, fourth density again is just inner work. It's all, you know, finding that compassion, the love in you. Realizing that. Now, fifth density again is outer work. You see everybody as co-creator. Because you already know you're a creator, a co-creator. So now you see everybody. It's almost like a third density, a higher third density type of work. And you can do it individually or, you know, with a group. But now in sixth density, you're balancing compassion again. Because now that you acquire wisdom, now you need to balance the newly acquired wisdom with the love that you brought from fourth density. And now you do inner work again, so everybody gets together. And you need to be harvested as a social memory complex, which is just inevitable at this point because there's not much to learn other than to learn in 7th density to do, again, what I would call outer inner work at the same time, because you're going out into the nothingness and into yourself. You see where it goes. So, you know, it's outer, inner, outer, inner, outer, inner, outer, I think. Yeah. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Did I say 6, 5, 7? I don't know. I'm rambling too much. That's it. That's all I got. Conclusions. You see, we explored cattle mutilations. That's just to say, okay, that exists. Let's go into the positive. Let's go into the opposite side of that, the polar opposite. Its polarity, because that's what's, you know, it's going to bring us to a higher means. And again, it's just not to, you know, say anything wrong about people who do their research and their work on cattle mutilation or UFOs. You see, something curious about this is that mentioning the chupacabras here, and just again, this is a practical point of view for dealing with reality. I remember as a kid I used to be afraid. I'm like, oh my god, if this thing comes here. By the way, Ross said that they're not able to harm 3rd density beings. They're not. That would be a violation of, a huge violation of free will. So don't fear not, fret not. It's only, you know, for shows. But yeah, as a kid, I used to see they give so much coverage to this sensationalist thing, you know, like all the chupacabras or whatever. There are other creatures that they started making. I forgot their names, but they gave names to different creatures because they started studying them and all this stuff. But I never heard anything about crop circles, for example, you know, or UFO abductions that were actually very positive, which is the majority of them, actually, you know. So you always heard the negative. If you think that we have transcended that with our new media, you'd be wrong, very wrong, because it's the same thing that's happening now. So all the things that you see now, like distracting you with the war or with the pandemic, which one you use, I don't know. All this stuff just to instill fear and all that. It's nice to know that exists because as a reflection, there's a positive side there. So, you know, there's communities going on about this stuff. There's all the positive, everything that you can see opposite to that is there too for you to explore. So it's always nice to say like, oh nice, you know, they're doing this, I can go over there, you know, I have these resources too. So that's what I'll get from cattle mutilation conversation 40 years ago between Don and Ra. And now to the energy centers again, which I think is the most fascinating topic that we can possibly discuss, because they describe our consciousness, and through them we can learn ourselves. We can learn to know ourselves, and that is the key of everything. Learn who you are, find out who you are, find out the I am portion of you, and you'll be well off on your way to seeing this cosmos and this universe as you, who you are. So with the energy centers, what we get is once again, you know, an exploration as to, you know, what I said at the end. Every one of those balancing exercises that we have for analyzing the self and our reality, catalyst, experience, and so on, is to, with our emotions, see where they are affecting us and where we put them and transcend from them. How we do it, it's completely up to us. You know, we have talk about plenty here in the raw material, and there's a lot of other stuff that it's, you know, it's helpful to know. So whatever you're into, that's fine. You know, as long as it's teaching you how to transcend, you know, these emotions into something, you know, real, which is love, the sentiment of love. So that's what we call transmuting anything into love. So inner work, outer work, you see where it is. That is, it's working, what it's related to. We have described the energy centers again in different ways, and these are, to me, the resources for having a better outcome in our lives and just to enjoy life in general. So with that, I come to the end of this first part. Second part, like I said, we're going to keep exploring 4th density, 5th density, 6th density, even what they eat. It's fascinating. So we're going to get into that too, of course. Thank you so much for watching. In the description is not only Scott Mandelker's, which I really recommend. He did it about 5-6 years ago, and he finished all 106 sessions. Little Easter egg, I didn't know about Scott Mandelker until I started doing the material, because I looked it up in Spanish and I realized that nobody had done it. And then I looked up in English Law of One material, and I only got Aaron Abke, which is fantastic. You should be aware of his work. And that was it. I think there's another Brian Scott is also a phenomenal guy who talks about the Law of One. He reads Kuo and other Confederation entities. All of them, I don't have Brian Scott's here, but Aaron Abke, you should know. If not, just type him in. But I have Scott Mandelker's playlist on the Law of One in my description. There's also how to support me and my work in the description, how to donate if that's something that you're inclined to do. If not, the best thing you can do is just give a like, subscribe, share it with somebody who is into this and want to know a little bit more. And that's it. That's all I got. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I love you because you are me and me are you. Started to sound like Jar Jar Binks here. But that's it. I'll see you in second part of session 43.